Hello and welcome to this video on writing scenes. Keep it moving. So when looking at the definition of a scene in writing a story, one definition is one continuous piece of action within a linear time frame and generally contained to a single location. That is a good rule of thumb to look at and use for what is a scene. Now, we understand in creative writing that we can break the rules. However, we need to understand the rules before we can break them. So I would say this is a good rule of thumb to start with. So what should a scene do? Well, it should advance the overall plot. It should effectively develop the character arc of whichever character you are dealing with at the time. And it should demonstrate changes in the protagonist. So now, granted, not all scenes are going to be about the protagonist, but we should at least see the change in the character that the scene is about. Think about it this way. We all change day to day, sometimes even hour to hour, based on what we experience, what we feel, and such. So therefore, we're constantly developing as people, so your characters need to develop as well. So let's look at an example from one of my books called Bring Down the Rain. A quick summary of this book is you have the main character Derek, grew up in North Carolina, was just about to start his senior year in high school. Was destined to be a excellent baseball player. Had a chance to make it to the major leagues. Gets into a car accident, and that ends up killing his father. And it mangles one of his legs to the point where he will never play baseball again. He and his mom move to Utah, where he starts his senior year in high school. And so he is faced with not only trying to figure out what he's going to do with the rest of his life, but he's moved to a completely different environment, away from everyone he knew, and such like that. And a scene that I wrote in here is that he develops a friendship with a young lady, and her name is Tiffany, because this takes place in the 1980s, of course. And they have an English class together, and in the English class they are studying literature that really focuses around the circle of life and death and such like this. So they're going to take a field trip to a cemetery to look at headstones and find different epitaphs and stuff like that. Derek assumes that they're going to go to the cemetery in Orem where he lives, although there is a bigger cemetery in Provo, which is the town next to it, that has older headstones and stuff like that, which is problematic because that's where they buried his father. And so what this scene does is that it's the trip down on the school bus, and he's sitting next to Tiffany, and they're getting to know each other. And it's very early in their relationship, and it's clear that she's interested in him and he's interested in her, but they're being kind of shy or whatever. They get to the cemetery, and they're looking around. And as they're trying to find the different, gravestones and stuff like that, they come across a group of boys who are standing on a grave that's fairly new, and saying, "Wow, this guy died pretty recently." Well, it was Derek's father, the grave that they were standing on. And Derek gets all upset, and he kind of goes and he shoves one of the kids out of the way, and he says, "Get off him!" And he breaks down and starts crying, which he's doing in front of a girl who he's trying to impress. And so that's the scene. So let's take a look at kind of what happened. Okay, well, did it advance the overall plot? Well, yes, it does, because not only are we advancing the chain of events, he's learning more about school, and they're going on this field trip, so the plot stuff is moving along. Do we see a development in the character arc? Well, yes. We learn that Derek is still, making friends at the school, and he's trying to be brave. He also is not completely emotionally stable because he is dealing with the loss of his father. And do we see a change in the protagonist? Yeah, because by the end he breaks down, and we learn that he is still dealing with the grief of losing his dad and all that has come with that. So that would be an example of a scene. Okay, let's move forward to, hello, there we go. Let's talk about scene transitions. The first step, so when we go from scene to scene, we want to make sure that we have a natural kind of flow from the plot. So again, plot is just this happens, then this happens, then this happens. It's like the chain of events. And we also need to make sure that the scene transitions can kind of plant a seed for what's coming up next, or maybe will come up in future scenes and stuff like that. So let's take a look at an example of this one. This is from another book that I wrote. This one's called From the Mirror of the Soul. It's a book that I actually wrote in conjunction with Chris de Burgh. He is a musician, probably the most famous for his song Lady in Red, which was a big hit back in the 80s. And he had written this song in about 2006, I think, called The Mirror of the Soul. And I thought the song was so powerful that I thought it would make a great book. So reached out to his management company, and we kind of worked it out. And so I got to write this book, which was pretty darn cool. The premise of this story is that a large diamond, this takes place in southern France right after the 100 Years' War. So it's about like the year 14, almost about the year 1500. And you have the Catholic Church, which is very prominent and kind of a big force and power of the areas. So this giant diamond falls from the sky, and it's found by this poor man who kind of lives out in this field. And when he picks it up, the diamond glows, and it's and he feels a sense of wonder and awe from this, and he doesn't know why it does what it does, and so he takes this diamond to the local abbey, because he's like, gosh, this has got to be a gift from God, and so he takes it to the local abbey. Well, at the abbey, the donations used to pour in during the war because the townspeople were, fearing for their lives, and so they figured that they needed to, really take care of that. And ever since the war kind of ended, the abbey has kind of fallen on hard times, and the abbot himself is not very happy with how things are going because he's not getting the respect that he sees. Well, when he finds out about this diamond, he realizes that he can use this diamond to manipulate people and to get donations and stuff like that. Well, in this particular scene, when we're transitioning, is the old man who finds this, his name is Jeffrey. He takes it to the abbey, and he brings it to the door, and one of the monks, who's basically been told not to let anybody in because it's dinner time and whatever, he says, but you've got to see this. You've got to see this wonderful thing that I have. And the monk realizes, wow, you know what, this is kind of what we've been looking for, because this guy's going to, give this to us, and we can use this to do stuff. So he wants to go tell the abbot. So that's where the scene ends. It's the beginning. And then we go to the next scene where so that first scene is told from Jeffrey's point of view, where he's taking it to the monks. The next scene is the abbot is actually sitting at dinner, and he's complaining about the food and not how well it was prepared and how they haven't been eating very well and how the monks are being lazy or whatever. And he's just in a grumpy mood when one of the monks comes in to tell him about this wondrous thing that came in, this diamond. And the reason why we have a scene shift is that we're having a shift from point of view. So all of a sudden we're no longer in Geoffrey's head and with what he's experiencing. We're going into the abbot's head and to see what he is thinking about this same thing. Okay? So it does have create a natural flow for the plot, because the plot was Geoffrey brings the diamond to the abbey, and then the next scene is that the abbot is aware of it, and then he's going to come out and see what's going on. And it plants a little seed, because what ends up happening, spoiler alert, is that the abbot, who's not a good person, ends up killing Geoffrey and stealing the diamond for his own use. And a little spoiler alert, when they go to grab the diamond to make it shine, they can't. Bum, 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 bum. But they still try to figure out a way to manipulate people. So there's that. Anyway, so let's talk really quickly about scene breaks. So when we have a break between scenes, there's a few different ways that can be done. Usually what happens is that when we have a scene break within a chapter, the standard is using 3 centered asterisks. It's kind of just a little like, hey, we're changing scenes here. Sometimes it's just a double space break. That can be problematic, especially if you're going from one page to another, because it may not be super clear. Some more stylized books may actually have like little pictures or little symbols between. So that is also something to consider. But for this class and for this program, the 3 centered asterisks are the kind of the standard. Okay, and some final thoughts about all of this. Scenes in and of themselves can be as long as they are, okay? And again, there's really no hard, fast rule, but they really should kind of advance the plot, advance the character, and help us see a change in that person. And then the very next scene should be some sort of logical next step of the story. Now, if you're telling a story from multiple points of view, you may have one scene end, and then you pick up from a different point of a different character, but it should connect with whatever scene that character was from before. So there's some thoughts about scenes, and hope this was a helpful video.